So I've had quite a few of you ask me in messages on my thoughts regarding the Bulls starting extension talks with Nikola Vucevic and whether or not this makes sense for the Bulls and why on earth they would be looking to bring back Vuce. And what I'll say is this, and then I'll dive into it a little bit further. This shouldn't be a surprise. The Bulls, whether or not they come to an agreement with Vucevic and ultimately resign him or let him walk, they wouldn't be doing their jobs to simply not have extension conversations with him whatsoever. Even if they didn't plan on keeping him around, simply you have to see where his head is at, where he feels his market value is, whether you can get him on a team-friendly deal, and then also assessing what your options could be by way of a sign and trade. So this shouldn't come as a shock to any Bulls fans that these conversations have started since the Bulls and Vucevic have until June 30th to reach an extension before he becomes an unrestricted free agent on July 1st. Now, that's a month away, so it was inevitable that these discussions would happen. And so in this video, we're going to be talking about what a deal could look like that would make sense for the Bulls and Vucevic, and whether Vuce will remain in a Bulls uniform at the start of next season. So what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Now, as I mentioned, Vuce is set to become an unrestricted free agent on July 1st, meaning he'll have the ability to test the open market and sign with whatever team he chooses for any amount. Well, up to the max, of course, but we all know Vuce isn't going to get a max level contract. Now, the Bulls can extend him before he becomes a free agent, or they can also re-sign him after he hits free agency should Vucevic look to test the open market and see what value he could potentially bring to other teams. All possible scenarios. What is not going to happen, I can guarantee you, is that the Bulls let Vucevic walk for nothing. That would be a horrible outcome and poor management on part of the front office. And I've seen a lot of Bulls fans say, well, why? Why not just let Vucevic walk? Who cares if you get nothing in return? Cut your losses and get his salary off the books to free up cap space and sign someone else. And what I think some Bulls fans fail to understand, and I've explained this before, but for those who may have missed it, I'll explain it again. If the Bulls let Vucevic walk, they decide they don't want him, say, thanks for the last couple of seasons, enjoy your next chapter. The Bulls do not suddenly get all that salary off their books and free up $22 million in cap space that Vuce was making last season. I repeat, the Bulls do not get any additional cap space by letting Vucevic walk. And here's why. The Bulls, as of right now, and this was the case last season, are an over-the-cap team, meaning they have more salary on their payroll than the NBA salary cap allows, but they're also under the luxury tax threshold. The NBA allows teams to operate over the cap to sign and retain their own free agents that they either drafted or acquired their bird rights via a trade. The rule is established to always give the player's current team a leg up to keep their players in having the ability to offer them the most money so they don't simply walk and sign with the best teams or the biggest markets. Still happens, but when it does, players are usually having to take discounts to do so. Now, because the Bulls already operate over the cap, in fact, they operate well enough over the cap that they're just below that luxury tax line because, of course, the Reinsdorfs are not going to be paying into the tax, but because the Bulls operate over the cap and they operate far enough over the cap, even if they don't re-sign Vucevic, they're not going to be freeing up any cap space. All of that salary is just gone. They're not going to be able to get it back by signing other free agents outright because the NBA does not allow teams to sign free agents if you're already over the cap. Unless, of course, it's through a sign and trade, which I'll talk about because that is another option that the Bulls do have. So if the Bulls lose Vucevic in free agency, that money is gone. They don't suddenly have all of this money to spend to try and find a replacement starting center. The only thing it would do is free up money for the Bulls to offer more to their other free agents. Like, you could easily re-sign Coby White, Ayo, Javonte Green, even Patrick Beverley if they wanted, because they wouldn't be pushed up against the tax line if they're now not needing to pay Vucevic. But it wouldn't mean the Bulls would suddenly have money to bring in other free agents from other teams. And here's the thing, because I've seen other fans say this, well, whatever, throw more money at Coby and Ayo. Then you can ensure you can keep both of them because, yes, there is a world, depending on the amount the Bulls re-sign Vucevic to, that they would not be able to re-sign both Coby and Ayo. It would actually put them over the tax. But then what? Who is going to be your starting center? Andre Drummond? Are you going to have Derrick Jones Jr. play the 5? Because again, you're not going to have money to bring in another center if you let Vucevic walk. Like, great, you're able to retain Coby and Ayo by giving them more money if Vucevic leaves, but where does that leave you for your starting center role, which the Bulls are already void of size and depth as a whole? Now, the other reason why it's not a surprise the Bulls would be having these contract extension talks with Vucevic is because, say Vuce is looking to leave, say he is wanting to go to another team, the Bulls have to be exploring all possibilities to get something in return than losing him for nothing. And this can be done by way of a sign and trade. The way a sign and trade works is a team works with another team to agree upon a trade for a given player, similar to how any other trade would work, but the team trading their own free agent would sign them first, and then trade them, which would allow for them to get whatever salary they're taking back to operate over the cap and getting the bird rights of the players they would also be taking in. And it also benefits the team you're trading to because they now have the ability to use that player's salary to operate over the cap and acquire their bird rights, which they otherwise would not be able to do if they simply sign them as a free agent on the open market. It is a little confusing, I know, even I myself explaining it get a little confused in the dynamics for how these things work, but the bottom line is the Bulls would be doing a disservice to themselves by not re-signing Vucevic, whether that means re-signing him to actually keep him on the roster and trading him down the line if needed, or re-signing him in the form of a sign and trade with another team. It would be a disaster if the Bulls lose Vucevic for nothing in free agency when they really have no other options for a starting center and wouldn't have the cap space outside of the mid-level exception to sign another one, especially when there aren't that many centers around the league who are going to be free agents this summer, or if they are free agents would be willing to take an offer as low as the mid-level exception, or centers that are known to be available on the trading block should the Bulls look to try to make a trade for another center. Jakob Poeltl is potentially one option who is going to be a free agent that you might be able to get for the mid-level exception, but my guess is he's going to want more money than that, and the Raptors, after having just traded away assets to get him at the deadline, will likely look to retain him, so I don't think that's a viable option. Now, some have asked, well, what would be a fair value contract for Vooch look like that the Bulls could re-sign him to? Well, for me personally, I think it makes the most sense to do a short-term deal because, again, Vucevic is going to be 33 this upcoming season. You have to realize he's only going to have so many good years left, and his All-Star days are already behind him. So a short-term deal, ideally 2 years, max 3 years, maybe a partial guarantee on the third deal if they can swing it. Something along the lines of 2 years, $40 million, or 3 years, $50 to $55 million. I know some of you are probably thinking that's crazy. Why would the Bulls offer Vooch a contract in the range of $20 million a year? Well, you have to understand the salary cap is increasing drastically this upcoming season, so $20 million is not what it used to be. It's actually only $8 million over the mid-level exception. It's a short-term deal, so you're not committing to a long-term agreement with Vooch. And look, I know a lot of Bulls fans are out on Vooch because we traded so much to get him, and he hasn't met expectations in taking this team to the next level. But first of all, that's not Vucevic's fault. That's on the front office who overpaid to get him. You have to remember that. It's not like Vooch traded himself for 2 first-round picks that ended up becoming lottery picks and Wendell Carter Jr. And second, you can get mad at Vooch all you want, but he's still a very productive player and one of the better centers in the NBA. Do you know how many players averaged a double-double last season? 11 players total. Vooch was one of them. And Vucevic was one of 5 that averaged more than 15 points per game and 11 rebounds across the entire NBA. Yes, we know he has his flaws. He's not the best defensively. He's a little slow on offense. He's not that athletic. His shooting has been inconsistent at times, especially from deep. But at the end of the day, there aren't that many centers in the league who can give you elite rebounding, solid scoring, and also possess the playmaking Vucevic does, who is one of the better passing big men in the league. Like, say what you will about Vucevic, but he's still one of the best players on this Bulls roster. And yes, it would be one thing if you had a viable backup option to replace him, but the Bulls don't. And Vooch on the open market, even at his age, is still going to command a lot of money. And because this is Vooch's likely last big contract for his career, he's not going to be willing to take a steep discount. Maybe to go to a contending team if he really desires to win a championship, but that's not the Bulls. We all know it's not going to be the Bulls. And if the Bulls want to keep him, they are going to have to pay him his fair market value, which I think is going to be close to 18 to 20 million per year, depending on the length of the contract. Now, I'm not opposed to the idea of a sign and trade. Again, sign and trades are tricky to execute because you have to get all sides to agree, meaning both teams and the player's agent, but it happens. The Bulls pulled off a sign and trade for DeMar DeRozan and Lonzo Ball in 2021. To me, the most likely option I see for a signing trade is with the Dallas Mavericks, who are in need of a legit starting center, and they have the salary to send back in a trade if they're looking to shed some bad contracts, which the Bulls could take on if the Mavs are willing to give up that number 10 pick in this year's draft, which would be a big come up for the Bulls, who don't have a draft pick this year, even though the Bulls would still need to figure out what to do with their center spot. Maybe by way of another trade, they could obtain one. Other trade options that I've talked about before, maybe DeAndre Ayton if the Suns are looking to move on from him, and Vucevic would fit the Suns' timeline. But despite Ayton being young, you're talking about taking on a hefty long-term contract that might not be favorable over time. But either way, the sign and trade options are going to be limited, unless of course the Bulls blow it up and include DeRozan in a package deal with Vucevic, but that's a topic for a different day, and an unlikely scenario because we all know the front office doesn't have the desire to blow things up and retool or rebuild, even to the fans' dismay. But let me know what you guys think in the comments of the Bulls beginning their talks on a contract extension with Vucevic. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.